Hey guys, what's up? So, Firefly released a 7-string offset, one pickup baritone scale guitar, and I got it right here, and we're going to check it out. So, stay tuned. Alright guys, so this was a highly anticipated build from Firefly. They had already released I think a 28-inch baritone scale 6-string of this thing, and when the idea of a 7-string popped up, it was very well received. Now, it wasn't for lack of criticism on one particular aspect of this guitar that we'll get into in a minute, but upon receiving this guitar, I gotta say that Firefly has probably become the most consistent and somewhat reliable cheap guitar brand. This is just one of many Fireflies I've had the chance to actually look at and play with, and I have yet to really find one that just completely misses the mark, which is impressive. So let's just dive into this one real quick. It's a 3-piece body of some sort of wood. If I'm looking at it, it's got like an open pore finish. The grain ends are not super matched well. It's definitely a 3-piece body. I don't know what the wood is. I forget because the guitar is sold out. Now, I guarantee they're going to do another run of these. They just have to because they sold out so quick. Either way, it has a roasted maple neck, a 2-piece neck with a scarf joint here, pretty par for the course. Also has a small volute here. Non-locking tuners. And it has what looks like probably a Macassar ebony fretboard, a little bit streaky, a little bit light, supposedly stainless steel frets. And one of the things I gotta mention here, these aren't the prefabricated ball-end stainless steel frets. If these are actually stainless steel frets, these were dressed just normally. They're not machined to be ball-end. These are just standard kind of dressed frets, and they're perfect. They're literally as good as I've seen on a Schecter, a Jackson, or an LTD. Better in some cases. And, there's even this little black binding around the fretboard, which I didn't even know about, which is kind of cool. I also like that it's got a blank fretboard, especially for this modern aesthetic. This is a very kind of modern, kind of genty offset guitar. Kind of has that look of like a Hoppus guitar. But there are some things to note here that aren't particularly optimal, and I think people have already kind of chimed in on that online. One of which being the placement of the pickup. People have been kind of somewhat taken aback by the fact that there's almost a 2-inch gap between the first pull piece here on the outer bobbin and the saddle on the bridge. That is a bit of a distance. Now, it's only about half an inch off of what you typically get on most guitars in this scale length. This being a 27-inch scale, I measured it. I thought it was 28, but I guess it's only 27. And so that does slightly affect the tonality. What it does is it kind of rolls off some of the top end just a tad, and it kind of sits the pickup in a spot where you're going to get a little bit more mid-range. It's not so far away that it's going to be a boomy bass sound, but it's going to sit more in the upper mids than it is going to be in that kind of clanky high end that you get with some more modern guitars where the pickups are really close to the bridge. With that said, this bridge looks like a Hipshot. I guarantee you this is not Hipshot hardware. It just is a Hipshot lookalike. I know what the screws and what the finish on the Hipshot bridges look like. This is not that. This is more of a gloss black finish. And these screws are more of like a shiny machine, just generic screw. When you look at Hipshots, they're more of a matte black finish, and the screws, they're more of a dull finish. This is just like a Hipshot wannabe bridge. Either way, for this price point, the aesthetic and the functionality of this bridge is better than some other ones that you get from other brands or even other Fireflies. Potentiometer is a single mini, like it looks like an alpha pot, push-pull pot. Nothing super crazy to write home about on that one. The nut seems to be molded plastic. I don't see it being graphite. I would be surprised if it were. And these non-locking tuners are okay. They're not the worst I've had, but they're not the best either. Because this is technically one of the more expensive Fireflies, it comes in at just under $300. I would surmise that they could have probably gotten away with putting some locking tuners on, and even if they had to bump up the price like $30, I think people would have paid it, just because this is a very unique and very, kind of sought after aesthetic for the style. For a 7-string, if you were to get this guitar, the two things I would absolutely look into replacing first would be the tuners with something a little bit more high-end, and probably the pickup, but you may not need to do that. We'll get into the sounds in a minute, and, you know, I have some recommendations on certain pickups that you might want to put in here that might alleviate some of that, you know, distance kind of top-end roll-off thing. And you can take it for what you will, but let's hear what it sounds like through this Engel Fireball. We'll start with some cleans, and then we'll just do some high-gain stuff. All right, so I'm on the clean channel, and since this is a single pickup kind of guitar, not going to be much to really demonstrate here except for the straight clean tone. And here's what I got. Single coil mode. So yeah, it's a pretty serviceable, punchy, almost PAF-like tone if you've ever played on like a more vintage style pickup on the bridge. The resistance on this pickup is only about 12.3 kilo ohms when I measured it. That is slightly a little bit underwound for what a 7-string pickup would clock in at. You might want something with a little bit more signal, a little bit more bite. But what it does do with that lower resistance and potentially with that lower inductance is likely give you a bit more clarity overall. And to me, the clean tone kind of tells you that there's plenty of clarity. Plenty of punch. There is sort of like a mid hump, and I think that is coming from the positioning of the pickup. If it were a little bit closer to the bridge, it'd be a little bit more scooped out and you get a little bit more of that shimmery top end sparkle. This plenty fine for what I like to do. But I don't think this guitar is really meant for clean tones. This is definitely designed to be kind of a chuggy metal monster. So I'm going to flip it over to the high gain channel and we'll get into that. All right, so I moved over to the high gain channel on this amp, and here's just the standard kind of chuggy tone. So right away, what I kind of gather is there is a softening of the pick attack, and I do think that has to do with the position of the pickup. I do think that at 12.3 resistance, you're not quite getting the full range of what a 7-string pickup could do, and that's why I say that this pickup, it's okay. You could probably swap it out. These guitars are basically built to be kind of accessible to the entry-level player, but also to the more seasoned player, somebody who could definitely modify the guitar to be more to what you want. And if I were going to recommend a pickup for this particular guitar, I would probably say that something like a Lundgren M7 or even the Lundgren Black Heaven would be a perfectly acceptable pickup style to put in here. It will absolutely dial in some of that more clarifying, clankiness that you would expect from something in the low tunings. Otherwise, if you want something a little bit more standard, you could definitely go with any of the Seymour Duncan modern stuff. The Black Winters will definitely do the job. If you want to go active, you could definitely do that. The routing on this pickup cavity is not necessarily the most, like, let's see if I can zoom in on that. It's a little bit on the rough side and maybe a little bit rounded out. You would have to verify, do some measurements to see if something like a Fishman Modern would fit in here, or like even an EMG, because the routings on these guitars are not always amenable to those kinds of modifications, especially for covered pickups. But uncovered, any of the Lundgren stuff would work. Or if you want to go super unique, you could check out the Corrigan Ashlight pickup that I did a review on. They make a 7-string variant, and I'll link to that video here. I'm a Corrigan artist. The Ashlight is a really cool pickup for 7-string. Kim from Monoscream developed it with Padraig over at Corrigan in Canada. That's another one that you could check out. Otherwise, if you're going to stick with this pickup, one thing I might recommend is putting an overdrive or some sort of boost pedal or EQ pedal in front of the amp to kind of dial up some of the clarity. Now, in doing that, I would definitely scale back the gain on the amp. And I went ahead and engaged the Devil Overdrive from Obsidian Audio here. And here's what I got with a little bit more of a push up front on this guitar. Yeah, engaging the Devil or any overdrive really is just going to put more of that clipping, more of that aggression back into the signal, and it's going to really hone in on a lot of those pick attack frequencies and really clean up this somewhat kind of thuddy pickup that they put in this guitar. Otherwise, swap out the pickup. So beyond that, for the price, this is a fantastic guitar. This is definitely a unique aesthetic at this price point. The playability, the fretwork, the setup that it came with were all pretty spot on. I think I made just a slight adjustment to the truss rod and a little bit of an adjustment to the intonation, but otherwise everything was exactly where it should be. I didn't have to really adjust any of the action. It comes with a compound radius. I think it comes with a 12 to 14 inch radius, if I'm correct. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong. Either way, it's compound, so you'll have to set the bridge saddles how you like them to match how you like the feel of a compound radius to feel. A lot of people have different ideas on what that should be. How it came out of the box to me was just fine. And yeah, overall, simple, looks cool, sounds pretty good, plays really well, and is easily modifiable to be something that you could definitely use on stage. And it just, out of all the Fireflies, this one has looked the best. There's definitely no notes for me on how it looks, aside from maybe the position of the pickup. But again, like I said, that's easily taken care of with either modification or a pedal in front. So anyway, that's my take on the new Firefly Baritone 7-string guitar. Leave your comments down below, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you guys later.